Hello, welcome again to the what podcast are we again?
The Family Values
Podcast. That's it. The time you're hearing this is probably going to be a week after we've recorded it, just because essentially we're 2 episodes behind. They've been recorded, but producer Harris has been away on the other side of the world, dancing with kangaroos. And did they have kangaroos in New Zealand? They had wallabies, didn't they?
I don't know. Maybe they took them all of the kangaroos over there because of the fires. So,
Yeah,
it might have done that.
They were actually talking about moving the koalas to New Zealand because they have a certain amount of eucalyptus trees. But then New Zealand, basically the environmental services in New Zealand said no because we don't want an invasive species.
Which is what the Australians have been saying for years about that, so that's quite a little bit ironic. But
Anyway, so Grandmaster H is back in the UK now, so we're going to have those last 2 episodes putting I'm going to say a date or two from when we're speaking to you now, which is Sunday the 9th of Feb. It's going to be kind of freestyly again, just because everything we have to talk about is kind of interconnected. It's essentially Iowa caucus, because we're now a few days removed from when the results were supposed to come in. You've still got 1 district to come in, I think.
Yeah, we are 99% reported, and the gap between Mr. Buttigieg and Mr. Sanders on the share of a vote is quite literally 0.1%.
I mean, it's like sheepskin condom. There's no fucking space between it.
Yeah, it is absolutely crazy, and I'm sure we're going to get into why that's causing certain people in the Twitter sphere to cry foul. But
particularly in the new hard left. I say that the hard left. I mean the new kind of woke left over there.
The new wave of democratic socialists, as they define themselves. Yes. We might define the term socialist very differently to how they define it, but they do call themselves democratic socialists.
We don't have a good idea with people declaring themselves. We don't have a good history of people declaring themselves democratic socialists, because you get the Democratic Socialist Republic of North Korea, the Democratic Republic of Congo. You see where this is going.
Yes.
Also, we're going to discuss, obviously, Trump being let off, quitted on the corruption charges.
His
impeachment.
Both on abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, with the only swing vote in any party being the former Republican candidate Mitt Romney.
Which, by the way, doesn't surprise me, because he is an ardent Mormon, and you know what they're like in regards. I mean, they're good people, apart from when they become culty. He essentially, I think, had to come out and do the right thing in his own mind.
Well, yes, he even referenced the fact that he swore an oath under God, and to a man like that, you can tell he's a genuinely God-fearing man. When you think about his politics, and he took that very seriously, and in his judgment, he had to vote to say that the president was guilty, which has obviously made about 30% of the country hate the person that they were lauding as the last president about 7 years ago, which is that's just American politics these days, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we'll be talking about, we've got a New Hampshire primary coming up. It's a quiet week in British politics. There's absolutely nothing going on, so there's not much to discuss.
Well, no, I was listening to LBC this morning, and they were discussing smart motorways, so that just tells you how
I was driving to pick up Sunday lunch at Tesco's, and it was just Farage going on about smart motorways. So we've now gone back to the mid-2000s of discussing the idea of smart motorways, probably parking tickets, and do old people feel lonely?
Well, after the last couple of years of crisis after crisis, it's a little bit nice to have boring politics for a little bit, until we go back into the crisis talks of the trade deal with Europe, which will no doubt come over the summer and over the coming months.
Right, so let's just jump straight in with it. Iowa caucus, Tom, take it away. What are your feelings?
Okay,
what did you observe?
What did I observe? Pretty much everyone, I wasn't going to stay up and watch the results come in, and it's a bloody good thing that you didn't, because there are no results to come in.
Because you really are the Jane Goodall of American politics.
I speak to those monkeys. But yeah, it's a very, very strange situation, because basically with American politics in particular, they pride themselves on being very quick on their results. They expect to have polls close at 8, they expect to have their results at 10. But it didn't come through, and it was about, I think it was about 11 o'clock at night when CNN was like, something is wrong here. And it turns out that the app that they had used and the backup ways that they're going to get the results from the caucuses in Iowa to the Central Democratic Party of Iowa just did not work and kept on collapsing. They failed 100 times over, and they didn't get any results until basically the next day in the evening, American time. When they released the results, it was 61% of the results they released, and it was Buttigieg was just ahead. Buttigieg declared victory, and Bernie Sanders supporters were outraged because they suspected that they were deliberately not releasing the results so that it looked like Buttigieg was winning more than he was. So we are now getting into tinfoil hat territory.
Absolutely. Let's state the obvious. Who was expecting Pete Buttigieg to jump ahead?
No.
And I suppose partly that's what's going to be driving that conspiracy theory, but also don't forget that Bernie Sanders is supported by kind of, I suppose, the more radical left, and they, like the radical right, are not they're not unfamiliar with conspiracy theories.
Oh no, definitely not. It does seem the more sort of off the edges you get on either political spectrum, the more willing they're to believe that there are sort of bold men in dark-filled, smoke-filled rooms planning everything out.
Absolutely. I mean, they actually view the Democratic, the Democratic establishment rather like, I don't know, like I was going to say the Ku Klux Klan for a minute. Sorry, my brain's fucking...
Democratic establishment in the 19th century, possibly, yeah.
Sorry, my mind's just on a flow at the moment, and not in a good way, I mean, like it's probably flowing out the side of my ear. They kind of see it as, you know, this kind of cult-like sort of... what's the fucking organisation I'm thinking of? It's supposed to be the centre of the world is controlled by...
Illuminati?
Illuminati, yes, because rappers started to believe that for some reason the urban youth started to believe that major rappers were involved in Illuminati.
Yeah,
like, well,
Jay-Z's in Beyonce, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's like, I think there'd be slightly more powerful people involved in the Illuminati than some bloke who earns a few million a year.
Well, you wouldn't know who they are as well. No. I think that's the main thing about them. Is if you know somebody, like, it's like the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
It's like everybody, or George Soros, everybody knows who those two people are, and whilst they might donate a hell of a lot of people to money to political causes, they'd be pretty shit puppet masters if everybody knew who they were.
I love George Soros fucking conspiracy theories from the right. They're just so funny.
Yeah, I mean, particularly the ones of George Soros, they do. But when they just say he controls everything, it's like, yeah, but those are borderline. You know what those are, kind of conspiracy theories.
He's a Hungarian with a few billion. He's not this. You know, he's not like a 1980s CIA operative. This is not Iran Contra. This idea that he's fucking funding left-wing protesters is fucking... Of course he's funding, you know, left-wing think tanks and stuff. Yeah, that's kind of expected.
It's his prerogative, though, isn't it? It's
absolutely, like, he's allowed to.
Yeah, it's a free country, and if you're a billionaire, I don't exactly completely agree with the idea that all money is free speech, but if he wants to fund those things, fair enough.
Because don't get me wrong, I'd love to find out who is behind the funding of the Taxpayers Alliance, because in all honesty, they just fucking bore me to death. And you know what that name means. It doesn't mean, oh, we want to know where our tax is going. It means we don't want to pay tax.
Yeah, so there's a lot of sort of transparency organisations where you're just like, well, what is actually your goal about that?
Yes.
And you see this with organisations that are highly respected. I mean, there was obviously the whole thing with Majid Nawaz and the Southern Poverty Law Centre about a year ago. Yeah. And that just, in my opinion, that just completely destroyed their reputation as a neutral arbiter of hate speech.
So for anyone who doesn't know, the Southern Poverty Law Centre, they're essentially an institution in the States. They've been around forever, but they basically categorise different types of hate, whether they be, you know, open violent racism or quote-unquote hate speech. And whether that be, you know, far left, far right, jihadism, they basically blacklist people. Yeah. And they note people as members, as kind of hate figures.
Yes.
They noted Majid Nawaz, who is an anti... I mean, if you're listening to this, I'm guessing you probably know who Majid Nawaz is, but he's the founder of the Quilliam Foundation. The Quilliam Foundation are the anti-extremism group that basically helps to bring people from the ledge, from both the far right, the far left, and jihadism into normal society and kind of reform their views. But because he basically does work... He works not just against the far right, in sort of destroying the far right, but also destroying kind of ultra Islamist conservatism and essentially jihadism.
Yeah, and he would know a lot about that, being a former Islamist himself.
He's a former Islamist himself. He was part of a major Islamist organisation.
That's
the one.
Yeah.
It was an Islamist organisation that basically believed in using democracy against itself to bring about Islamist coups in the Muslim world.
Not too dissimilar from the Muslim Brotherhood, but
Yes,
a
exactly.
separate organisation, yeah.
So he essentially was blacklisted by, or was noted up as flagged as a hate figure by the Southern Poverty Law Centre, essentially because he does work to reform the views of on the sort of the lower scale side of things against ultra conservative Islamists or just Muslims. The left always kind of interpret that, or the hard left always kind of interpret that as him being Uncle Tom, so to speak.
Yes, because there is a strain of thought within very small minority of that sort of hard left, which sort of thinks that any criticism of Islam is basically hidden racism or dog whistles.
And by the way, I have close friends who've actually referred to Majid Nawaz as an Uncle Tom.
Which is... I think that's one of the most racist things you can say, particularly.
Absolutely.
It's just absolutely horrible.
By a white person, by the way.
With that, oh God, wow. I wouldn't say that's even worse, but they really should know better, particularly if they must live in London.
Yes.
Yeah, they really should know.
They actually live about a 10-minute walk from where we are now.
Oh, okay. But yeah, and he ended up suing them for what was it, $2 million, I think, and won.
I think he got the best part of $3 million.
And winning for defamation in America is nigh on impossible.
Absolutely.
So he actually managed to do that, and then he as a good man, he donated all that to charity.
There was good reason as to why he did that, which is essentially his bank accounts with certain banks, including HSBC, was blocked.
Yeah,
because once you're flagged up by the Southern Poverty Law Centre, essentially everyone will block your accounts.
Yes, it's actually quite a scary thing, which because it's a completely private institution, completely privately funded, and so many different organisations use it. They really don't have any sort of checks and balances on them, but they are so highly respected and sort of by the media, in the finance world, to try and stop it. But I think it is quite bad, and they've kind of been taken over a little bit by this sort of intersectional quote unquote woke mentality, which kind of gives what Majid was kind of pointing out.
Just to make the point, we've kind of blown into the wind. Saying it's on a day of the worst storm in 7 years in the UK.
Yeah, we're blaming Kira for our tangents now.
So basically, where were we? Iowa caucus. Conspiracy theories left, right, and centre from the centre left, from the centre left to the hard left. Basically, the crux of it is they believe an app that had to be downloaded to take part in the caucus voting, called Shadow.
Yeah, which is and none of us know if you fucking could have one.
Was essentially a Trojan horse or a folly to essentially block any Sanders vote and basically push forward the Buttigieg vote.
Yes, that is the allegation, and the evidence for this is obviously all circumstantial, but people will point to tweets sent out by the CEO of Shadow, which has been very, very supportive of Buttigieg, and the fact that a hell of a lot of people that work for the Shadow company have worked for previous Democratic campaigns, including the Hillary Clinton campaign. Which is, as I say, it's giving fuel to the fire, although, as we were saying before the podcast, I'm a much bigger fan of the idea of this just a massive cock-up rather than a conspiracy.
Honestly, I just think it's incompetence. You can imagine it's going to be run in big part not just by the Democratic base or Democratic HQ, it's also going to be run by the local Democratic Party of Iowa.
Yes.
You can imagine it's going to be just kind of a general fuck-up.
Yeah, and they had a big speech of the chairman of the Democratic Party of Iowa, who was a pretty young guy, and was basically his main job is to make sure that this goes well.
Yeah.
And he just came out and said, I did not do my job. He didn't resign or anything, because that would be taking too much responsibility, but he basically took a responsibility, but didn't actually fulfill the consequences.
He didn't fall on his sword.
No. Which always makes me a bit suspicious of people who actually think that they're responsible, whether they're just trying to say things to stop the media.
Just trying to save face,
exactly.
Yeah. We're going to state a probably more interesting fact from this vote, which is Joe Biden has come out fourth.
Fourth, behind Elizabeth Warren, behind Sanders, and behind Pete Buttigieg.
Only in front of Klobuchar, because Klobuchar is the fifth person running this race. Everyone else pretty much is out of it at this point.
Yes. Although Andrew Yang, fair enough to him, he got 1% of the vote share. That was on the second preference as well.
Someone like Yang is just not going to get any traction in Iowa.
No.
I don't mean because he's Chinese. I mean that he's a very, very metropolitan figure.
Yes, yeah, he's very popular in the sort of Silicon Valley urban demographics, but I'm not even using that as
he's very much like,
urban.
I think he is from San Francisco, right? He's very much fits in there. He's, you know, Silicon Valley tech startup. I think he's actually from a tech startup background.
Yeah, that's how he made his money, basically, because at the beginning he was self-funding his campaign until we got onto a load of sort of online shows, and that's how he sort of got the ball rolling.
And that just doesn't appeal in Iowa. I mean, what surprises me actually is Klobuchar didn't move a bit further in Iowa, because she's very like Midwest.
She's from Montana, I believe, which is obviously right next to
the neighbouring state of Iowa.
So this is probably going to be her best showing.
And normally, if you're from like a Central European background in the Midwest, I mean, you're seen as part of the people. Klobuchar, I'm guessing she's either Polish or German or Czech or something. So normally that takes you a long way in the Midwest.
But yeah, it's as you say. I think you're right to assess that Joe Biden's failure in Iowa is probably the bigger story than Buttigieg's success.
I kind of fell off there. Yeah, once again veering away. I mean, Biden. My thoughts on this is essentially, I think we were just discussing this before we started recording. Biden, kind of backing from HQ, I think they've dropped him.
Yeah. And I think this might have always been the plan, as it were. They were going to see where the first results were going to go. And I reckon if Joe Biden had won or even come second in Iowa, and it was between a clear race between him and Bernie Sanders, you would have had Barack Obama coming out and endorsing him so far. And it's a very, very telling, the silence from the Obama camp when it comes to this.
There's been no real official backing.
No.
And the reality is he'd been, touted for years to be the natural candidate.
Yes.
But the reality is, I think he started to show his face after he put his hat in the ring, so to speak, and he essentially, he's bothering, he was making gaffes, he was essentially come across as senile, which is not surprising. The man's 76, 77.
Yeah, it's really not, but there's a lot of people who are that old in the field, and they don't have that feeling. Bernie doesn't have that feeling, Warren doesn't have that feeling, Trump doesn't even have that feeling. But Joe Biden really does feel a hell of a lot older than the rest of the candidates.
Now he does, yeah. I mean, obviously he came across before he threw his hat in the ring, particularly during the kind of Obama years, as essentially a statesman in the wing.
So he came across as the sort of older hand who had been there for a long time. And Barack Obama, especially when he first took office, he'd only been a senator for like one term. Yeah. So he was still a relatively new face in Washington.
So he needed a bit more of an establishment figure.
Yes, exactly.
To back him up.
Yes.
Because Biden's been part of the Democratic establishment for fucking decades.
Yes, at this point he's run, I believe, 2, possibly 3 times for president beforehand. None of these candidates previously have gone very well. But he had been, up until this point, leading in the polls pretty much the entire race.
And I just have to say this from my own observation, stepping out of the impartial box for a moment, he just comes across as a plank. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. He's not he's not the kind of populist figure that the Democratic Party needs in a moment. He is he's the standard, we will, I will. He's not this kind of brash Mussolini waving the finger, flowing the chin figure that they need to rival Trump. And I don't mean populist sentiment. I don't mean anti-immigration promises and stuff like that. I just mean someone who can come out and talk in this kind of firebrand tone, which Sanders, weirdly enough, can do.
Oh, he was brilliant. Sanders was on top form in the New Hampshire debate, which I was looking over yesterday. And compared to the other candidate, he had those moments where you could tell the crowd were listening to every single word he was saying, because he was delivering it in the perfect left-wing populist message. And he was delivering it in a very, very sort of grandiose way. For the first time, he actually sounded like a proper candidate that could really sort of hold the nation, as it were.
Because we tend to forget. I mean, he was down to the last 2 in the last race.
Yes, and we kind of look over that because there were only really 2 people running in that race last time. And he never really looked like he could pull ahead against Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's interesting actually. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's the first time that in a long time that I can remember, at least in my living memory, that there's been more than 2 candidates actually competing for a Democratic nomination. Because basically going back all the way, the only one I can't really remember is 2004.
Effectively, what you're saying is, by the time we get to the Iowa caucuses and then the New Hampshire primary, by that time, usually you're down to 2 candidates.
That seems to be the history.
Because this is still an open race. I mean, it could be anyone.
It could be anyone, and I would say that it is really the main 2 you're looking at now are Buttigieg and Sanders.
Yeah.
Although I do think it's important to have the caveat with Buttigieg's really good performance in Iowa. I wouldn't say that he had won it. I would say it's more basically an effective tie. Yeah. But I would say that Iowa was the state which Buttigieg had to win because everything was in his favour.
Yes.
He could appeal to his small town mayor. Like that's a massive plus for him.
Yeah.
Whereas everywhere else in the country, apart from Iowa, it's a minus.
He's a mayor also in the Midwest, isn't he? He's like Indiana or something.
Indiana, yes.
South End.
Yes, that's it.
A small city, a small city in the Midwest. I mean, that kind of, says it all. I think, obviously saying that, the Democratic Party has kind of dropped their kind of their fingers on from what's the fucking term I'm looking for? Jesus, on
drop the ball.
Well, they've dropped the ball. They've dropped their backing for Biden. I think the establishment or the Democratic HQ I think is backing Buttigieg.
I think that seems to be the message at the moment. I think they would have preferred to back Warren. But
really?
I think they would have done because this is the thing.
I think he's too big a troublemaker.
This is the thing as well. I have a sneaking suspicion that Warren is one of these people that runs to the left in the primary and then will just go back to the centre.
Do you think, because I think Buttigieg and Warren represent 2 different things to me within the party going forward. Buttigieg is a centrist that he appeals generally to the kind of traditional centre of the Democratic Party. It doesn't matter if he's gay. I really don't think because obviously he's gay and he's a veteran as well. But I think the reality is if you want to win back the kind of socially conservative Democrats that you've lost in the Rust Belt and in the Midwest, it doesn't matter if he's a veteran. Gay kind of what's the term I'm looking for? Balances it out.
Yeah, it sort of eliminates. I mean, a good example of that, unfortunately, was actually shown this week by one of the Iowa caucus voters. There was a video that went viral where she had voted for Buttigieg, and then somebody had just offhandedly mentioned the fact that he had a male partner.
Yeah.
And then she asked the woman who was holding the vote, was like, "Can I take my vote back?" Just because he was gay. And I think a lot of people assume that Democrats are left wing, therefore they're all accepting of gay people.
No,
that's not the case.
Like with the Labour Party here, where the Labour Party and the Democratic Party are similar, or as different as they are, is that in the traditional industrial areas and the agricultural areas, non-management agricultural workers and industrial workers tend to support the Democratic Party.
Yeah, but that has always been the case.
When it's large industry, yes.
Yes, but similar again to here is that you're seeing, or it really started before in America, was those people are resonating with the sort of populist message that Trump had.
Yeah.
And smart Democrats are trying to do every single thing they possibly can to avoid what happened here happened over there now.
You really have to believe it. They are fucking watching what happened there, and that's why they do not want Sanders. Because Sanders, the last election in the UK, so near enough 2 months ago now, it kind of cemented what would happen in the US if they chose Sanders as their candidate.
Yeah.
Because again, it's a pretty much direct comparison between Sanders and Corbyn.
Yeah.
We're in a similar place, except our opposition was actually made up of old school socialists as opposed to trying to fight their way in.
Yeah, it's quite funny. Like, we had old school genuine socialists who tried to tell people that they weren't socialists.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders
is not really a socialist, at least in the European sense.
Yeah. But he's trying to convince the base that he is a socialist.
Yes.
It's a very weird dichotomy there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I would say that with Sanders, there were a few things that Sanders has going for him a little bit more, which is Sanders is just a more likeable candidate than Jeremy Corbyn.
Absolutely,
I would say. Just on personality, he's much better on the stump than Jeremy Corbyn is. I would say.
Well, I think a real problem Corbyn has going for him, away from being... I mean, they're both metropolitans. I mean, Sanders is from New York. I mean, I know that he's now the senator from Vermont, but he's traditionally from New York. Corbyn's from... I don't think he's actually originally from London, but he's from a millionaire family with an 11-room house somewhere outside of London, probably Oxfordshire, I'd imagine. So he's very much a metropolitan figure. He's been the representative for Islington North for fucking decades. He comes across as way more of a militant figure than Sanders.
Yes, and he comes across as somebody who's just not willing to open up to the other side. And he always came across as sort of unpatriotic, whereas Sanders does come across as a lot more patriotic. He's just the traditional left-wing type of patriot.
And there's certain things going in Sanders. I mean, look, let's be honest. No one to the right is going to be voting for Sanders.
No.
But there are certain aspects that kind of make him a bit more warming, which is he has some kind of, I suppose, traditional kind of conservative aspects, which, you know, he believes in protecting gun rights. We don't really know where he stands on pot. People assume he's probably not in favour.
I think he's mentioned that he would look into legalising it.
You know what that means.
Yeah, which means he probably wouldn't do it. But it is interesting that is probably one of the few things that the president does have complete other power of, because they do control the sort of scheduling in America.
By the way, don't get it wrong. There's some old authoritarian aspects to Corbyn, including never wanting any kind of drug legalised in this country, which puts him at absolute odds with his with the kind of the Labour base here. But all in all, he's socially just not that conservative.
No, not in the slightest, which is probably why he never really appealed to anyone north of Birmingham, really.
No.
On a mass scale, at least.
North of Birmingham, mate. Do you mean north of Watford?
North of Watford, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, let's not forget that fucking focus group that took place a few weeks ago in Birmingham that said that Lisa Nandy will be, you know, ultimately will be who they will back in Birmingham, essentially for the Labour Party and Labour Party candidate, and that Long Bailey has no support. Absolutely none.
No, and there have been polls, I believe, done by YouGov this week to actually back that up even further.
And that's why I don't trust the NEC, because essentially they're trying to make out as if, oh yeah, she's got momentum going in the party. Bollocks. If you want to go to the traditional Labour heartlands and ask who would you vote for, whether you voted Labour in the last election or whether you are being asked who will bring you back, it's never Long Bailey.
No.
Ever. It doesn't matter whether it's somewhere in the northwest, outside of Manchester, like somewhere like Bolsover, or whether it's somewhere in the northeast, somewhere like Sunderland. You are not fucking. You're not finding any support for Long Bailey.
No, yeah, and well, it is quite funny because they're almost implicitly admitting that Corbyn was a failure by not trying to get rid of the continuity candidate label from Rebecca Long Bailey.
Yeah.
Whereas the reason that I've heard from the few people that have said are intending to vote for Rebecca Long Bailey have literally stated, and these are all people from London, not
yeah,
shocker,
I was going to say that,
have stated because she's the continuity candidate.
Because
obviously they understand what that is.
If you polled London, I guarantee you'd find LBS, Long Bailey will be the front running candidate.
Yeah.
It'll be a fight between Long Bailey and Keir Starmer. But as soon as you go to the north, you'll find there'll be no contest. It will be Nandy. Mm-hmm. I don't even think Starmer has a fucking egg in that race.
No, I don't think Starmer is trying to have an egg in that race either.
Well, I think we discussed this the other week. I think Starmer's on the verge of pulling out.
He possibly could be, although that was...
As far as I know, he hasn't recommenced his campaign.
Not that I've seen, although I haven't seen a lot of the candidates, because they all seem to be going quite quiet.
They've gone into hibernation at the minute.
Yeah. I think what they're trying to do is that they're using the sort of... because it's such a long campaign, they're trying to make not people be bored of it, so they're only going to really start ramping up the campaign again towards the end, maybe in March time.
So you from next month, let's say this time next month, you could see a month countdown essentially, and you could see this ramp up.
I would predict that's what's going to happen because...
I hope so. Because it's fucking boring at the moment.
Oh, it's so boring, particularly after the last 3 months of British politics.
I do think this is Starmer related, you know. I do think because essentially a part of the establishment of the party away from the NEC and Momentum really wants Starmer to be there, you know, to stand. I think he's on the verge of pulling out, and I think essentially, this is a party-made stalemate, a party-made seizure of operations and campaigning at the moment. I don't think this is organic. I think they're trying to assess the situation and see what they can do. I think the centrist establishment wants Starmer. does not want Starmer to drop out, but he just doesn't seem to have quite the support they thought he did. I think the obviously momentum, there's only one candidate, it's Long Bailey, but then they realised where it actually matters, the support is behind Andy. And so I don't think this is organic. I literally think it's a conscious effort to stop campaigning at the moment and essentially reassess what's going on in the party.
That would be very interesting. It would probably be the smartest thing to do then if they are trying to switch from... Because the MPs really did back Starmer.
Yep.
When you look at the number of MPs that backed him. And if they've sort of changed their mind about it, they have to it's very delicate to try and switch their support.
The usual suspects that have quite a lot, that have the real power within the Labour Party, so people like Yvette Cooper, for example, and I suppose even Blair still to this day, or even, Starmer himself, because Starmer's a pretty senior figure in the Labour Party. I mean, these will obviously all be Starmer backing. They will all be Starmer backing, the Starmer backers. But they've become, obviously we know, they've become a weakened bloc.
Yes,
because a lot of centrists lost their seat in the north. A lot of Brexiteers lost their seats in the north. Momentum, as the actual rank and file membership has just skyrocketed in the last 5 years in terms of the hard left membership of the party.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how motivated they are at the moment, momentum, because taking such a gut punch as those general elections, you've got to imagine that at least a little bit, it's going to take a lot of the wind out of their sails on the ground level.
Do you see, if Long Bailey ends up as the candidate, and I do see that as likely, because I look, as much as I think Keir Starmer, we all know Keir Starmer's he's not the safe option because they're still not going to win the next election with Starmer. He'd be just, again, like a Neil Kinnock figure. Hopefully a reforming figure. I can see Long Bailey winning this, and what happens to the party then?
Well, if that is the case, then I think that you'll probably have a year or two where...
There'll be... I was just thinking this. I was about to ask this question. Do you think they'll be on shaky grounds where, once again, like the first year of Corbyn's premiership within the party, there'll be votes with no confidence and people walking out of shadow cabinets and...
Not within a year. I think they will sit back and think, right, well, we know what these people are like. We know that they're shit. We know that they're going to fuck up eventually. Let them accumulate all the fuck-ups and then go for them. Because the biggest mistake that the Parliamentary Labour Party made, apart from letting Corbyn on the ballot in the first place, was going for him too early after the Brexit result. Because he still had a hell of a lot of shine. He hadn't gone through an election yet. He hadn't lost an election. So... and a lot of the youth in particular, he was very, very popular with young people at that time.
Still is.
Still is, but I would say less so, because you don't get the sort of Jeremy Corbyn festivals these days.
I guarantee, and this is momentum driven, if you still ask young people, young middle class kind of, Londonite people and sort of also I suppose the home counties, who do you support to be current leader of the Labour Party? It's to actually say Jeremy Corbyn. And as we know, John Lansman and Momentum were still pushing essentially to keep him for as long as they could as leader of the party.
I agree with him. I think it's a great idea.
Look, don't get me wrong.
I'm joking.
I think the question is, obviously we know Long Bailey will bring further instability to the party if she becomes leader. I don't know if you saw, there's a report this morning saying that leaked from someone that there'd be 50 MPs ready to walk out if Long Bailey became leader.
That would be very interesting.
Which I don't believe it, by the way.
You don't believe it? You just think it's a threat?
Well, think back to earlier this year when supposedly a large group of 30 MPs led by Watson was supposed to leave the party and go to Change, and none of them did.
No. That was pretty pathetic. And if they were going to leave, they wouldn't. I would say, but they couldn't go to an independent group because that is just it. Obviously, completely screwed up, and it was just complete powerless. They would have to defect to the Lib Dems.
Yeah,
and it would be hilarious.
Fucking luck. Yeah,
it would be hilarious if they did that because
you'd all lose your seats.
Yeah, they would all lose their seats in the next election, but. it would literally, if 30 of them left, let's say just 30 of them went.
As opposed to 50.
As opposed to 50.
Because it's going to be a certain ratio that doesn't. Yeah. Certain ratio doesn't, yeah.
You'd have, 42, 41 Lib Dem MPs then, with 75% of them being ex-Labour MPs and naturally not being elected under Lib Dem MPs.
And we know how this goes. Mm-hmm. Whenever the Lib Dems tried this, particularly in the last election, it fucking fails. They tried it with both relatively senior fucking members of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer and Luciana Berger, in seats they thought would be absolutely safe for them.
Yes.
They both did not win those seats.
Completely. But I think that the Lib Dems, from their perspective, you could get a very, very interesting thing, because one of the things that the Lib Dems have always... They've had two goals, basically, on a political front. Either get proportional representation or...
go into coalition.
Or go into coalition.
Yep.
But the ultimate goal, or plan A, would be to become the predominant party of the left, as it were. To get rid of the Labour Party.
You basically, what you're saying is they think the Labour Party destroying itself by centrists leaving and joining another organisation, whether it be joining the Lib Dems or whether it be forming some other party like the SDP, and it all collapses. And then the other half, well, I say half, I mean, the reality is, in terms of MPs, I mean, there's way more centrists than there are hard left MPs in Labour.
Well, that's it. And I think they'd be relatively ease at calling themselves Liberal Democrats.
So it means Labour would further lose a load of seats. No, not right.
But you could have this interesting sort of civil war on the left/centre left.
If you think about it, Labour's now essentially down to the seats. They're now down to the seats they could never lose in the metropolitan areas. They've lost all the seats they could potentially lose in the north. They're now down to their bare bones as the opposition. They're now down to as many seats as they could lose.
And the only way that they're going to lose more is if they just utterly, completely collapse as a party and the Lib Dems sort of take over that ground.
It won't happen.
It might not happen, but if the Lib Dem leadership see that as
they will charge for it.
Exactly.
And once again, it'll be a foot on the rake type moment where they will end up just stepping on a rake and it slapping them in the face. Yeah. It's Simpsons style, And because every time the Lib Dems try something like this, it tends to bite them in the arse.
Yes, and any grand strategy, particularly we are reminded of the future Prime Minister Joe Swinson.
Yes.
Which, just did. In fact, doesn't bring
my favourite geography teacher.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, useless fucking leader, but all leaders post Clegg, so Farron and her, Cable's a comparable... Cable's not a politician, he's an economist.
Well, this is interesting, because they're supposed to be having a leadership contest right now,
yes.
Dems, aren't they?
They are.
Because I've not heard literally a word about it. You think the Labour leadership has gone quiet?
Well, because let's be honest, at the moment, the Lib Dem leadership just doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, they all have like 4 or 5 cabinet positions each.
The Lib Dems are now down to 3 more seats than they had at the end, after the coalition collapsed.
Yeah.
So
it effectively, as a political force, doesn't matter at the moment. But if they actually want to get back on the horse and actually go for it, they're going to have to organise somehow.
I could see next election, if they don't pull anything out of the bag in terms of any kind of USB, they could potentially lose even more seats next election.
You think there's a lot of sort of centre-left people don't think there's a lot of point even voting for them?
Yeah, I see the seats in the West Country basically just not voting for them anymore. Probably the last seats to vote for them in the West Country I could see going blue. Apart from maybe the Bristol ones that could go red.
I was going to say they would more likely to actually go blue because the Bristol ones, you can say the urban ones will
go red.
Possibly go red. I think there's one solid red.
The slightly rural ones in the West Country, I think, will go blue. That just leaves the seats pretty much in London, which is just like a couple of seats in West London, and then obviously you've got the South.
I'll say Cambridgeshire as well.
I forgot they took Cambridge.
There's a few like university towns that they've got quite a big like local party.
They've got one constituency in Oxford, and
but
which again I consider the West Country. I know you don't, but because it's west of London, going out like for fuck's sake, it's the Cotswolds are there, and it borders Gloucestershire. To me,
can you get a pasty?
I'd assume so. Yeah, dude. I was on the border between Dorset and Hampshire in the summer. I was in a town called Lymington, and And fuck me, the locals had West Country accents. This was in just on the border in Hampshire, and there was a pasty shop.
Well, like a local one, and not just like
this is the New Forest, and if you look at the map of Hampshire, the New Forest does stretch out well into like the West Country to Dorset and by Wiltshire and that. But no, actual pasty shops, and the locals had West Country accents.
Oh, clearly there's sort of a slowly creep of West Country people coming through. It's just taken 1,000 years for them to move out of Devon and Cornwall, but they're slowly coming out.
No, again, to me, Wiltshire's the West as well, man. Like, it's just culturally, if there's fucking cider and pasties, I consider, and a funny accent, I consider it the West.
Well, I suppose it's sort of similar to the North as well, where a lot of places in the sort of
Carlisle and cultural West. Yeah. Well, like we've said this on this podcast before. I don't consider it. There's a North-South divide. There's a North-South-West divide in this country in terms of culture.
Yeah, there's a sort of
economics.
Yeah, there's a when it comes to culture, there's sort of the four countries, and then within England, there's the South, East, and everywhere else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, if you're in the east of the country, you either fall into the North divide or South divide. I don't think anywhere west of London actually falls into, maybe with the exception of like Oxfordshire and maybe half of Hampshire. Half of Oxfordshire, half of Hampshire actually falls into the cultural south. I think most of it onwards, sort of like from Reading onwards, turns it, or like maybe Bracknell onwards, turns into the cultural west.
Yeah, I'd say, but Reading is a lot more. It feels more like a big commuter town. I went to university in Reading,
But yeah, pretty when you go further west from Reading, I'd say pretty comes the cultural west.
Yeah.
I think again cider, real ale, pasties, funny accents, rugby. Rugby being a massive factor out there.
Yeah. It's particularly, which is ironic because there's so many hills up there, so playing rugby in those hills is a bloody nightmare.
I think because we veered off a bit, let's just shut this down with your predictions for the New Hampshire primary that happens on Tuesday.
Okay, well, this is going to feel very prophetic because we're going to have them released, the podcast released afterwards.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's too controversial to say that Bernie Sanders is most likely to win New Hampshire.
Because it's his territory.
It is his territory. He won New Hampshire against Clinton.
Yep.
He's been at top of the polls there for a while. The more interesting aspect of this race is going to be it's really one thing. How much of a moderate vote is Buttigieg going to take from Biden? And if Buttigieg can get within touching distance of Sanders and have clearly cement themselves as the moderate candidate going forward, then unless Joe Biden wins South Carolina by such a large margin that people have to take notice, which is looking less and less likely by the hour, then it looks like that Joe Biden is going to be out of the race, which would have been completely unheard of like 2 months ago.
I'm kind of hoping for it. I think once he's dropped out of the party, it gets a bit of the party. Once he's dropped out of the race, I think he's going to retire.
Oh yeah, he's not going to run anything else.
No, I don't think. I think he will retire, and I think he'll give up his seat in Congress.
He doesn't have a. You were talking about Biden now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't have a seat.
Does he not?
No,
he doesn't represent anyone.
No, he used to be a senator. But at the moment, he hasn't actually held office since 2016.
So that retirement will be quite easy then.
Yes, I mean he's basically been preparing for this run ever since Hillary Clinton lost.
Yes.
That's been his full-time job.
Yeah.
And obviously he's been getting paid to do speeches and whatnot, as all ex-politicians do.
Yeah, so you can retire and then do the odd speech and earn $500 per speech or whatever. So
oh yeah, I think that came out this week.
Someone that senior.
Well, it came out this week, but even Theresa May's earned nearly £500,000 since she left office.
There you go.
Completely unsurprising, really.
Nah. So obviously we've got New Hampshire on Tuesday. I really wanted. I'm to be honest, because to me the most important thing in British politics is the Labour leadership debate, but just nothing's happening at the moment. And I do think, like I said, I don't think it's organic. I think this is the party has basically stopped all campaigning. Essentially, I could be wrong. But I think they're reassessing where they stand, where certain things stand, and where they have to put their backing behind.
Well, but I would say, in all seriousness, probably be a good thing. It does actually sound like they might be going through that period of reflection that Jeremy Corbyn did call for, although it doesn't look like his wing of the party ever really took that seriously.
No, we know Momentum never does any real reflection. Do you know what they reflect on? Their vote base.
Yeah, or how they got screwed over by the media.
Yes.
It's always the media. It's always the bloody media.
It's always the media's fault, right-wing media.
Yeah.
just out to get us. Just awful people.
They keep reporting on the fuck-ups we do. It's just not fair.
And people just can't... Those damn working class people, they just don't think for themselves.
No,
people have to tell them what to think.
They just don't know what's good for them.
They don't have their own code of moral structure and economics. They have to be told what to think.
Exactly.
And they need to listen to us.
Exactly. They need to be manipulated by us.
They need to be patronised by us.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, before this becomes just a screaming fest, let's fucking shut this off. Right, speak to you next week. Bye.